The hallway smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner when Mr. Halden backed me against the wall. His palm hit the space beside my head with a dull thump that made my ears ring. We'd just left the Tuesday strategy meeting where I'd questioned his decision to cut client deliverables by 30% without consulting the project team. His face was inches from mine now, close enough that I could smell the mint gum he chewed constantly. "You don't question me in front of the team," he hissed, his voice low and controlled. I tried stepping sideways, but he moved with me, blocking my path with his body. My laptop bag slipped off my shoulder and hit the floor with a crack that made me wince. Then came the shove, his hand flat against my collarbone, pushing me back until the wall stopped my momentum. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like angry insects. "HR stays out of this," he said, enunciating each word carefully. "Do we understand each other?" My throat closed up, but my mind was already recording everything. The time, the location, the exact pressure of his hand. I nodded once, and he stepped back, straightening his tie like nothing had happened. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook, writing down every detail I could remember. The color of his shirt, navy blue. The exact words he'd used. The way my shoulder blade had hit the textured wall hard enough to leave a mark I could still feel. By morning, I'd filled 3 pages in my smallest handwriting. At 8:30, I walked into the HR office on the 3rd floor, my hands shaking so badly I had to clasp them together. Kendra looked up from her computer with that practiced smile HR people perfect, all warmth with no actual heat behind it. "Naomi, what can I do for you?" I sat down and told her everything, watching her expression stay perfectly neutral while she took notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen and tilted her head sympathetically. "We'll look into it," she said, like she was discussing a scheduling conflict. I leaned forward. He physically pushed me against a wall. Kendra's smile didn't waver. "You know Mr. Halden has been with the firm for 15 years, right? He's one of our most valued partners." The words hung between us like a warning. The cafeteria at lunch was half empty, which made it easier to spot Alicia sitting alone near the windows. I grabbed my salad and slid into the seat across from her, trying to look casual even though my heart was hammering. We'd worked together on 3 major projects, and she was one of the few people in the office who didn't worship Halden like he was some kind of consulting god. I started slow, mentioning how tense yesterday's meeting had been, how Halden seemed on edge lately. Alicia stabbed at her pasta, not meeting my eyes. Then I said it, keeping my voice low. He cornered me in the hallway after. Got physical. Her fork clattered against her plate, and her head snapped up. Her eyes darted to the security camera mounted in the corner before she leaned across the table. "You're not the first," she whispered. My stomach dropped. She told me about late-night texts that crossed lines, comments about women's bodies disguised as jokes, accidental touches that weren't accidents at all. 3 other women had complained to HR over the past 2 years. Every complaint had vanished into thin air. "They protect him," Alicia said. "Always have." I started staying late at the office, claiming I needed quiet time to catch up on project reports. Really, I was hunting. Our firm used a shared drive system that most people barely understood, folders nested inside folders going back years. Halden was meticulous about his client work, but careless about his digital trail everywhere else. On Thursday night, alone except for the cleaning crew vacuuming down the hall, I found what I was looking for. Buried in an old project folder from 2 years ago were his performance review notes, the private ones that never made it into official documents. Comments about female employees that made my skin crawl. Attractive but too emotional for senior roles. Needs to smile more during presentations. Would be more effective if she dressed more professionally. Attached to a review for someone who always wore suits. He'd thought deleting them from the main system meant they were gone. He didn't know about archive backups. I copied everything to my personal encrypted drive, my hands steady even though my pulse was racing. Outside the windows, Chicago's lights sparkled like broken glass. I was building something brick by brick. The body cam arrived in a plain brown box on Saturday. It was smaller than I'd expected, disguised as a decorative pearl brooch that nobody would look at twice. I'd found it on a website that specialized in security equipment for people who needed to protect themselves. The description said it could record up to 8 hours of video with audio, stored on a tiny SD card hidden inside. I practiced pinning it to different blazers, testing the angles in my bathroom mirror until I found the position that captured the most without being obvious. Monday morning, I wore it to work for the first time, feeling like I was carrying a loaded weapon under my jacket. Halden barely looked at me during the morning meeting, but I caught him making a comment to one of the junior associates about her skirt length, his tone dripping with something that wasn't quite appropriate for a workplace. The camera caught it all. After that, I wore it every single day, documenting every meeting, every hallway conversation, every moment his mask slipped. I didn't know exactly when I'd need the footage, but I knew the moment would come. The elevator incident happened on a Wednesday evening when most people had already left for the day. I'd stayed late again, legitimately this time, finishing a client proposal that was due Thursday morning. The elevator doors opened on the 7th floor, and my stomach sank when I saw Halden step inside. We were alone. The door slid shut with a soft whoosh, and the elevator started its descent. He moved closer, invading my space until I could smell his cologne, something expensive and overwhelming. "Careful, Naomi," he said softly, his hand reaching out to brush against my arm. The touch lingered too long to be accidental. Careers can end overnight in this business. You'd be surprised how quickly someone can become unemployable. His fingers trailed down to my wrist before he pulled away. I kept my breathing steady, my eyes on the floor numbers ticking down, while the camera under my blazer recorded everything. The angle was perfect, catching his hand, his face, the threat in his voice. When the doors finally opened on the ground floor, I walked out without a word, my legs steady even though everything inside me was screaming. That footage was worth more than gold. I returned to HR on Friday afternoon, this time with my phone in my pocket, recording every word. Kendra looked less pleased to see me now, her smile tighter around the edges. I sat down and said I had evidence, letting the word hang in the air between us. Her expression shifted, something that might have been concern or might have been calculation. "What kind of evidence?" she asked carefully. I didn't show her, not yet. Instead, I watched her reaction as I described the recordings, the timestamps, the patterns I documented. She leaned forward, and her voice dropped to a whisper that my phone's microphone barely caught. "Be careful, Naomi. Accusations like these can make you unemployable. You're young. You have your whole career ahead of you. Sometimes it's better to let things go and move forward." It wasn't advice. It was a threat wrapped in concern, a suggestion that my silence was worth more than my dignity. I thanked her politely and left, adding her voice to my growing collection of evidence. HR wasn't going to save me. They were part of the problem, and now I had proof. Friday night, I invited 3 women to my apartment. Alicia arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine like we were having a normal girls' night. Sophie came next, a data analyst who'd transferred from another department last year. Monique showed up last, looking nervous, glancing over her shoulder like someone might have followed her. We sat in my living room with the curtains drawn, and I asked them to share their stories. Alicia went first, describing how Halden had called her at 11 p.m. on a work trip, suggesting they meet for drinks in the hotel bar. When she declined, he'd made her next project assignment miserable. Sophie talked about the way he stood too close during presentations, his hand on the small of her back, guiding her like she was a child. Monique's story was worse, forced to endure comments about her body during performance reviews, his eyes traveling places they shouldn't. By the time we finished, my living room felt heavy with collective rage and pain. We were 4 different women with the same scars, the same buried anger. Together, we were something Halden couldn't shove into silence anymore. We created a private group chat that weekend, disguised as a book club in case anyone looked. Chapter discussions were really strategy sessions. Book recommendations were pieces of evidence we were collecting. Each of us had fragments, small things that seemed meaningless alone but formed a damning picture when assembled together. Sophie had saved emails where Halden had made inappropriate requests for after-hours meetings. Monique had text messages with timestamps proving his late-night contacts. Alicia had documented every comment about her appearance during team meetings. I had the recordings, the videos, the archive files. We organized everything in a shared encrypted folder, building a case like we were investigative journalists. Monday through Wednesday, we worked our regular jobs, smiling politely, attending meetings, pretending everything was normal. At night, we compared notes and strengthened our documentation. We were becoming something dangerous, something that couldn't be dismissed. But fear was still our enemy. One crack in our alliance could bring everything down, and Halden seemed to sense something was shifting. Sophie called me at midnight on Thursday, her voice shaking so badly I could barely understand her. "He knows something, Naomi. He called me into his office today and asked if I'd been talking to you. He said he'd heard rumors that some employees were plotting against him." He looked right at me when he said it. My blood ran cold. Had he somehow found out about our group chat? Was someone monitoring us? I thought about every conversation we'd had, every email we'd sent. We'd been careful, but maybe not careful enough. Sophie was spiraling, convinced she was going to lose her job, worried about her mother who depended on her income, panicking about being blacklisted from the entire consulting industry. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I have too much to lose. I'm sorry, but I need to drop out." I gripped my phone tighter, staring at the ceiling of my dark bedroom. If Sophie left, she'd become a weakness in our armor. Halden would know he'd broken one of us, and he'd press harder until the rest of us crumbled too. I couldn't let that happen. I met Sophie for coffee the next morning before work, at a place far from the office where we wouldn't run into coworkers. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't slept any more than I had. I didn't try to convince her with logic or appeals to justice. Instead, I reminded her what fear had already cost us. Years of silence, of accepting treatment we'd never tolerate anywhere else, of watching our careers stall while men like Halden climbed higher on the backs of people they'd hurt. "He wins if you leave," I said quietly. "He's counting on us being too scared to fight back. That's how he's gotten away with this for 15 years. Sophie's hands trembled around her coffee cup. Finally, she asked the question that mattered. "Do you actually have a plan that guarantees we'll be protected?" I looked her in the eyes and lied. Yes. I didn't, not yet. But sometimes you have to pretend strength until it becomes real. Sometimes lies are necessary to keep people brave enough to see things through. Sophie nodded slowly and agreed to stay, on the condition that we wouldn't move forward until we had ironclad protection. I promised her we would, already knowing where I'd find the answer. The office holiday party happened the following Friday, held at an upscale hotel ballroom downtown. I wore my bodycam brooch with a dress that made it look intentional, decorative rather than functional. The firm had paid for an open bar, which turned out to be Halden's mistake. By 10 p.m., he was drunk enough that his carefully maintained professional veneer started cracking. I watched him corner Madison, a junior associate fresh out of graduate school, near the bar. She looked uncomfortable, trying to edge away while he leaned closer, invading her space. I positioned myself nearby, holding my phone low like I was texting, actually recording. His voice carried just enough for the microphone to catch it. "You know HR won't touch me, right?" he slurred, gesturing broadly with his whiskey glass. "I built this firm. 20 years of bringing in clients, training people, making partners rich. They need me more than they need any of you." He laughed, loud and ugly. "You think filing complaints matters? It doesn't. Nothing matters except results, and I deliver results." Madison looked horrified, finally managing to escape toward the bathroom. I stopped recording and saved the file immediately, my hands steady despite the rage burning in my chest. I spent the entire weekend organizing everything into one comprehensive file. Every recording, every email, every screenshot, every timestamp. I created a detailed timeline that showed the pattern of behavior stretching back years, connected to specific incidents and victims. The documentation was meticulous, indexed and cross-referenced, formatted like a legal brief. I called it the Halden file, and just seeing it completed on my laptop screen felt like holding something powerful and dangerous. Saturday night, I backed it up to 3 different encrypted cloud drives, a USB stick I hid in my apartment, and another copy I mailed to my parents' house with instructions not to open it unless something happened to me. This wasn't just about winning anymore. This was about insurance, about making sure that even if Halden found a way to destroy me professionally, the truth would survive. Sunday evening, I sat on my couch staring at the file icon, my finger hovering over the trackpad. The weapon was loaded. But firing it meant everything would change, and I couldn't predict all the ways the explosion would reshape my life. Monday morning, I scheduled what I called a casual check-in with Kendra, claiming I wanted to discuss my career development. She seemed relieved that I wasn't bringing up Halden again, her professional smile back in full force. We sat in her office with the door closed, and I steered the conversation carefully toward workplace culture and complaint processes. Then I asked the question directly, my phone recording in my pocket. Hypothetically, if someone had documented proof of harassment, actual evidence, would the company take action? Kendra shifted in her chair, her smile becoming forced. Well, that depends on many factors. The nature of the evidence, the parties involved, the potential impact on business relationships. I pushed harder. But if the proof was clear and undeniable? She laughed, but it sounded nervous. Naomi, can I be honest with you? That's how things work here. Some people are more valuable to the organization than others. If you want a future in this industry, you learn not to be difficult. You learn to pick your battles carefully. My stomach twisted, but I kept my expression neutral. So, even with proof, nothing would change? Kendra leaned forward, her voice dropping. I'm trying to help you understand reality. Fighting battles you can't win only hurts you. That night, I created an anonymous email account using encryption software that masked my location and identity. I'd spent hours researching investigative journalists in Chicago, looking for someone who specialized in workplace misconduct stories. Marcus Rivera had written several pieces exposing corporate corruption and had a reputation for protecting his sources. I crafted the email carefully, professional but compelling, attaching the Halden file with a note explaining what he'd find inside. The documentation of harassment spanning years, the recordings proving retaliation, and most damning, HR's active cover-up and complicity in protecting an abuser. My finger hovered over the send button for a long time. Once I pressed it, there was no taking it back. The file would exist outside my control, a story waiting to explode that could reshape my entire life in ways I couldn't predict. I thought about Alicia, Sophie, Monique, and all the women who'd suffered in silence before us. I thought about Madison at the holiday party, young and scared and believing she had no power. Then I pressed send and watched the email disappear into the digital void. The weapon was fired, but the impact wouldn't be immediate. Monday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. I made coffee, dressed carefully in one of my best suits, and arrived at the office at my usual time. By 9:30, Halden's assistant called me. Mr. Halden wants to see you in his office immediately. My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. I'll be right there. His office was on the corner of the 8th floor, windows overlooking the Chicago River, decorated with expensive furniture that screamed success. When I walked in, he was standing with his back to me, hands in his pockets, staring out at the water. He didn't turn around immediately. Close the door, he said quietly. I did, my heart hammering but my hands steady. When he finally faced me, his expression was cold and calculated. You're ambitious, Naomi. I've always appreciated that about you. But ambition without loyalty. He walked to his desk and picked up a piece of paper already signed. That's a career killer. It was a termination form, effective immediately. My position was being eliminated due to restructuring. The severance package was generous, he noted, more than I deserved given my short tenure. I had 1 hour to clear my desk. He slid the paper across his desk, watching my face for a reaction. I didn't react the way he expected. I picked up the termination form, read it carefully, and thanked him politely for the severance package. His eyes narrowed, confused by my composure. What he didn't know was that I'd already lit the fuse, and the explosion was coming faster than either of us anticipated. I cleaned out my desk methodically, packing personal items into a box while coworkers watched with sympathetic expressions that didn't quite hide their relief it wasn't them. By 11 a.m., I was walking out of the building with my cardboard box, my laptop bag, and a strange sense of freedom. That evening, Marcus Rivera's article hit the Chicago Tribune's website. The headline was brutal and direct. Consulting firm buries years of abuse claims against senior partner. The story didn't hold back, detailing the pattern of harassment, the recordings I'd provided, HR's systematic cover-up, and Halden's drunken confession at the holiday party about being untouchable. My phone exploded with notifications. Text messages from coworkers, some horrified, some thanking me anonymously, some asking if the story was true. By midnight, the article had been shared thousands of times across social media, and my name was everywhere. Halden's counterattack came fast and vicious. By Tuesday afternoon, rumors started spreading through professional networks that I'd fabricated evidence, that I was mentally unstable, that I'd been fired for poor performance and was seeking revenge. He called in favors from colleagues across the industry, people who owed him professionally and didn't ask questions. Suddenly, LinkedIn connections I'd cultivated for years went cold. Friends from business schools stopped responding to messages. Former mentors sent carefully worded emails suggesting I take time away from the industry until things cooled down. Wednesday morning, I received a formal letter from Halden's attorney threatening a defamation lawsuit unless I issued a public retraction and apology. The letter detailed how my false accusations had damaged his reputation and caused him emotional distress. It was professionally written intimidation, designed to make me fold. Thursday, a respected industry blog published an anonymous editorial questioning the credibility of harassment allegations in general, using language that clearly referenced my case without naming me directly. For 3 days, it felt like the world was tilting against me, and I questioned whether speaking up had been worth the cost. Then Friday morning, everything shifted. Alicia posted her story on a women's professional forum, using her real name and detailing her experiences with Halden over 3 years. She included screenshots of inappropriate text messages and emails that corroborated the patterns in my documentation. Within hours, Monique posted on LinkedIn, adding her voice to Alicia's, describing the comments about her body during performance reviews and the retaliation she'd faced for pushing back. By afternoon, Sophie had published a detailed account on Medium, explaining how Halden had isolated her professionally after she'd refused to meet him for drinks during a business trip. Her post included email evidence showing how her project assignments had suddenly become dead-end work after that incident. Then 2 women I'd never even met came forward, former employees who'd left the firm years ago rather than continue enduring Halden's behavior. Their stories matched ours, creating an unmistakable pattern spanning nearly a decade. The dam had broken, and the flood was unstoppable. Social media lit up with a hashtag that emerged organically, women across the consulting industry sharing their own stories of harassment and retaliation, creating a movement that was bigger than just our firm. The emergency board meeting happened the following Monday. I wasn't there, but Alicia still had contacts inside who fed her information throughout the day. Halden sat at the head of the long mahogany conference table in the firm's largest conference room, trying to project his usual confidence. But across from him, 6 board members sat with printed copies of Marcus Rivera's article, printouts of the social media posts, and summaries of the growing public relations crisis. According to Alicia's source, the meeting was tense from the start. The board's lead counsel outlined the legal exposure the firm faced, potential lawsuits from multiple victims, regulatory investigations, client defections driven by reputational damage. One board member asked the question that mattered most. Why are so many women telling the same story with such consistent details? Halden tried his usual deflections, claiming coordination among disgruntled employees, suggesting a conspiracy to damage him professionally. But his explanations sounded hollow against the weight of documented evidence. The questions got sharper, the tone more accusatory. By late afternoon, the decision was made. Halden was placed on immediate administrative leave, pending a full independent investigation. The announcement went out to all staff at 5 p.m., carefully worded to avoid admitting liability, while acknowledging the seriousness of the allegations. Kendra disappeared from the office the following week. No announcement, no goodbye email, just an empty desk and a locked office door. Word leaked through administrative assistants that she'd been terminated for gross negligence in handling harassment complaints. Her systematic dismissal of multiple complaints over several years had created legal liability the firm couldn't ignore. The internal investigation uncovered that she documented concerns about Halden in private notes but had never escalated them to the board or legal counsel, choosing instead to protect a senior partner at the expense of junior employees. Her professional reputation was destroyed overnight, her LinkedIn profile scrubbed clean, her name becoming a cautionary tale in HR circles about the cost of complicity. I felt no satisfaction watching her fall, only a grim acknowledgement that consequences were finally reaching people who'd enabled abuse through their silence and inaction. The firm hired a new HR director from outside, someone with a reputation for taking complaints seriously and implementing actual accountability. But for Kendra, the damage was permanent. She'd chosen to protect power instead of people, and that choice had ended her career. My fight wasn't finished, though. Halden was still fighting, still hiring expensive attorneys, still trying to salvage something from the wreckage. The civil suit came together faster than I'd expected. Marcus Rivera connected us with an attorney named Patricia Chirin who specialized in employment discrimination and harassment cases. Patricia had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in depositions and had won several high-profile settlements against major corporations. We met in her downtown office on a cold Tuesday morning, all four of us together for the first time since that night in my apartment. Patricia reviewed our documentation with the focused intensity of someone who knew exactly what she was looking at. After 2 hours, she looked up from her laptop and said simply, "This is one of the strongest cases I've seen in 15 years of practice." We filed jointly, naming both Halden and the firm as defendants, alleging sexual harassment, hostile work environment, and retaliation. The complaint was detailed and damning, 37 pages that laid out the pattern of abuse and the systematic failure of institutional protection. Sitting in that conference room, preparing to fight publicly and officially, I felt stronger than I ever had alone. Halden glared at me from across the courtroom during the initial hearing, his expression full of rage and disbelief that we dared to challenge him. But his fury was powerless now, just the death throes of someone who'd finally lost control. The settlement offer came 6 weeks later, delivered through the firm's attorneys to Patricia's office. It was substantial, more money than I'd make in 5 years at my old salary, multiplied across 4 plaintiffs. The firm would pay damages, implement new harassment prevention policies, and provide regular training for all employees. But there was one condition that made my stomach turn. We had to sign non-disclosure agreements, promising never to discuss the case publicly, never to disparage the firm or Halden, effectively selling our silence in exchange for financial compensation. Patricia presented the offer neutrally, explaining that settlements like this were common, that fighting through trial could take years with uncertain outcomes, that the money could change our lives. Alicia's eyes widened at the numbers, clearly tempted. Sophie bit her lip, torn between principle and practicality. Monique looked at me, waiting to see my reaction. I thought about all the women who'd come before us, who'd taken similar settlements and disappeared into silence. I thought about the women who'd come after us if we let Halden buy his way out of real consequences. He bought silence before, I said quietly. Are we really going to sell it again? The conference room went silent. Patricia watched us carefully, her expression unreadable. We rejected the settlement offer. Patricia called the firm's attorneys that same afternoon and told them we were proceeding to trial. The decision sent shockwaves through Chicago's legal community. Most harassment cases settled quietly, buried under NDAs and sealed court records. Taking a case like this to public trial was rare, risky, and guaranteed to be brutal for everyone involved. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Halden's attorneys tried everything, attacking our credibility, suggesting we'd coordinated our stories, implying financial motivation. But Patricia was better. She walked the jury through our documentation methodically, playing recordings that made people in the courtroom visibly uncomfortable, showing emails that revealed the systematic nature of the harassment. Expert witnesses testified about patterns of workplace abuse and institutional failure. Former employees who'd taken settlements years ago violated their NDAs to testify about similar experiences, choosing truth over legal consequences. The most powerful moment came when Sophie took the stand and described how Halden's retaliation had derailed her career, her voice steady but her hands shaking. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the forewoman stood and delivered the verdict that changed everything. Guilty on all counts. Halden was personally liable for harassment and retaliation. The firm was liable for negligent supervision and creating a hostile work environment. I walked out of that courthouse on a Friday afternoon in early spring, the cold wind off Lake Michigan biting through my coat, but somehow feeling cleansing. The 4 of us stood together on the courthouse steps, while Patricia fielded questions from reporters who'd gathered to cover the verdict. Camera flashes went off, but I barely noticed them. The trial had taken everything from me, my savings, my peace of mind, months of reliving trauma in public. But standing there with those women beside me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not the kind Halden had wielded, power over others through fear and manipulation. Real power, the kind that came from refusing to be silent, from standing up even when it cost everything, from building something together that couldn't be torn down. My career would rebuild eventually, or maybe I'd do something completely different. The consulting world might blacklist me, or maybe I'd become exactly the kind of person other women sought out when they needed someone who understood. What mattered was that my voice had survived. When I thought back to that Tuesday afternoon when Halden shoved me against the wall, I didn't feel the fear anymore. I felt something like pride. He'd thought he could intimidate me into silence. Instead, he'd created someone who refused to be moved.